could for a minute, we'll be starting here in a little bit. I would ask that everybody silence their cell phones if they have not already done so, or turn them off. We will be streaming the meeting live on the TDR YouTube page, so it will be videoed and audio for it. If you're addressing the board, or if you're on the board and speaking, please make sure you use the mics. Okay? For those of you in the audience, if you wish to address the board, please complete a form that's over here and hand that to me as soon as you get it, please.
No, you can't.
Just a thing for blind people.
Thank you.
They can do it all without.
Well, yes, I don't need it now. They were able to give this to me.
I'm assuming the public, they were licensed, bowler.
Yes.
You're watching all that. More than 300-gallon storage tank, too.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the advisory board for the board to order. Right now, we will move on to item A of the agenda for roll call. And Angelica, would you please call roll for me, please?
Rob Trout, presiding
Here.
officer.
Here.
Norman Anderson.
Here.
George Crawford.
Here.
Alan Kripe.
Here.
Gerald Harris.
Here.
Bill Quisenberry.
Here.
Brian Mullen.
Here.
Naomi Doyle. Stuart Nestor.
Here.
Dan Lancaster.
Here.
Mark Thompson. And Richard West.
Okay, it appears that we have a quorum. So that'll bring us to item C, approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting? And if so, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
For the record, Gerald Harris, and I so move.
Mark Thompson. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of our last meeting. Are there any discussion or any corrections that need to be made that anybody is aware of? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not voting? Motion passes. That will bring us to public comment, item D on the agenda. Is there anybody that wishes to address the board? I have not received any papers. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and move on to item E. So that brings us up to staff reports. We'll start off with licensing division. Ms. Tarsha Red.
Before we go into that, Mr. Chair, can I make a couple of comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic, thank you. Hey, it's a pleasure. This is Commissioner Collier, and I want to, thank everybody for being here today. It takes a commitment to be on the board and go through the rules that you did this morning. So I appreciate your participation this morning through the summit. Thank you for what you're doing right now, and it's a pleasure to be here because it's very important to the industry and from a safety standpoint, so thanks so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Red?
Yes. I almost said good morning. We've been here a while. Good afternoon. Tarsha Red, Licensing Division. And as you can see from the report, there's not been a lot of movement. Not much has changed in respect to the number of licensees, the population of boilers. Those numbers change slightly from time to time, but it all, again, is a snapshot of the moment in time in which the numbers were captured. If you notice on my report, there's an asterisk next to the number of active boiler inspectors saying pending review. I just found it odd that the number of active inspectors was the exact number for the last two reports as the number of renewals. So I just wanted to have our IT division to check those numbers to make sure that it was right. And when you look at the number of inspectors that may have changed from companies, one company to another, those changes made the numbers where they actually matched, but I just wanted to make sure that that was correct, so that's why that's there. Any questions?
None? Thank you, Ms. Red.
Thank you.
So Customer Support Division, Jacqueline Rush.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Rush. I'm with the Customer Service Division. And I have some personnel updates for you, some staff updates, excuse me, and the statistics of emails and phone calls that we receive in customer service. We have 9 new customer service representatives that have started with us since November 1st of 2019. A lot of those are replacing customer service representatives that have moved on within the agency or retired or moved on to the private sector. We have 6 of those that started just this month that are wrapping up their training and working on phones and emails upstairs right now. On March 2nd, excuse me, on March 2nd, we'll have 9 new customer service representatives starting with our division. Did you have any questions on the emails or phone calls that we receive? None? Okay. Any questions on anything else?
I'm sorry.
Oh, any other questions?
Okay. Any questions?
No, just
No.
congratulations on getting some more help.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. Moving on to Enforcement Division, Mr. John Matlock.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is John Medlock. I'm a senior attorney or senior prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. First off, just some personnel updates. In our second quarter, we had quite a bit of hiring. Angela Chavez was hired as an administrative 3. She started January 15th. She was previously a patient service representative for the Oakwood Women's Center. Carciela Vargas was hired in the intake section as a legal assistant 2. She started February 18th. She has an associate's in criminal justice, and she's coming to us from Travis County. Matthew Higgins is also in the intake section. He's also a legal assistant 2. He started the same day as February 18th. He's got a master's in legal studies. He's also a certified paralegal, mediator, and had previously worked for the Internal Revenue Service. Our investigations got a new investigator, an investigator 4, who started the February 18th. He is an Army veteran, and he left the Texas Veterans Commission to come to him, and his name is Kayvon Edwards. In the prosecution section, we had a couple of promotions and a couple of hires. First, with the legal assistants, Miss Jackie Revilla, who's been with the agency for quite a while, was promoted from a legal assistant 4 to a legal assistant 5. Essentially, now it's kind of more of a managerial responsibility within the legal assistant section there in the prosecution section. And also Debbie Hawkins was promoted from a legal assistant 3 to a legal assistant 5. Again, kind of they're going to be sharing duties in some of the managing of the legal assistants that we have. We have about 30 of them in the prosecution section. So they're going to help out the legal assistant manager, Daryl, with that. As far as prosecutors, we got 2 new prosecutors, Arusa Nizami and Natalie Olvera. They're both attorney 2s with us, doing a lot more of our inspections type cases. They both started January 15th. Ms. Nizami came to us from private practice, and Ms. Olvera came to us from the Department of Insurance. And finally, one promotion was actually myself. This will actually probably be the last presentation I give to you guys, even though it was kind of bittersweet. I've been doing this for about 6 years with this board, but I was recently promoted from a senior prosecutor to the chief prosecutor, so now I'll be overseeing the prosecutors. We've got 18 of them in our section, so I'll be day-to-day management of those folks. So I'll be sad to leave in giving these reports, but we will make sure that we get somebody here to give these reports to you in the same adequate fashion that I did.
David Gonzalez, Executive Office. If you really want to, Mr. Medlock, we can make an exception for you.
I know you probably could, yes. I know you could. Moving on, as you'll see, we're kind of expanding our reports, kind of give you guys a little bit more information, and that's going to be mainly in the statistics section, and we'll go through that. But again, just to start off again with the case highlights, there's only one case to present to you. It is Elan USA LP. On October 16th of 2019, the department and the respondent entered into an agreed order against that owner-operator. They failed to file the extension in an appropriate time, and for that internal inspection, which is kind of timely with the discussion that we had this morning. And they had an expired certificate of operation for 9 boilers. The department, we assessed an administrative penalty of $33,750, and we required them to submit water treatment records to departments and to have an internal inspection prior to the expiration of that next certificate. We are happy to say that administrative penalty was paid in full. Now moving on to some of the statistics that you can see, there's a lot more numbers and graphs and a lot of different types of numbers. And as I go through it, I'll kind of explain what some of these are. So the first kind of big section is the performance measures and key statistics. And these first ones are for the fiscal year of 2020 through December of 19. Our fiscal year goes from September to August, so this is the first half of this year. So these performance measures are kind of what we report to our legislature on kind of how we handle cases and how the different things that we're kind of judged on with the legislature. So as you can see, we broke it down between the boiler program and TDLR as a whole. You know, the first one is cases open. That's just honestly what it is, the number of cases that we've opened. In this program, we've only opened 1 case, whereas in TDLR through December, we had opened up a little over 3,200 cases. And that's about the average for what it is for TDLR as a whole. And sometimes boilers, you can see when we look through some of the numbers for previous years, you'll see, you know, it kind of fluxes between about, you know, anywhere from like 5 to 10 a year in this program is what we open. Cases close. That 1 case that we opened did close. Sometimes those numbers won't match because sometimes we'll open a case in 1 fiscal year and close it in the next fiscal year. So sometimes those numbers won't be 100% corresponding. Average days to close. That's the time from when we open the case till we close it, whether it be some form of disciplinary action, agreed order, commission order, or if it's closed because it was a warning, closure, or some kind of informal resolution. So that's an average of all of our cases, is what that number is. So in this program, it was 140 days. That's easy because it was just that 1 case. For TDLR as a whole, we were running at about 151. The percentage of cases resolved within 6 months, again, that number is 180 days. So in both measures, we're closing the majority of our cases within 6 months, which is a good thing. And then the next number is the cases that result in a disciplinary action. So disciplinary action would result from anything that's not a closed case, in the sense that it's an agreed order with some sort of penalty, obviously a default order where the person didn't respond to us, or not in the event of a lot of the cases in the boiler program, but in general, if a case goes to the State Office of Administrative Hearings and then we end up getting a commission order. So that would result in a disciplinary action. So as you can see, TDLR as a whole, it's about 20%, and that's about average. It's about between 20 and 25% of all of our cases result in some form of disciplinary action, whether it be an administrative penalty or some form of a sanction. And then the last one is cases pending. Currently, right now, there are 6 cases pending in the intake or investigation section. So those are cases that are working its way to the prosecutors. They just haven't quite made it to our desk yet. And with TDR as a whole, you can see it's a little over 5,300 cases right now that we have. The graphs below show you the cases, the percentage breakdown of the cases that were open and kind of where they're coming from. So as you can see, we only had the one case in Boilers, and that was a departmental complaint. When you look at TDR as a whole, about a little over half of our cases this year are coming from consumer complaints. That is the general public and outside people saying that something went wrong in one of these programs, and so they file a complaint with us. 17% were departmental complaints. That's either through one of our investigators seeing something and opening up additional cases. Maybe it's somebody in our RPM section that has noticed something and has filed a complaint. So those are your departmental type complaints. And then about 30% is criminal history. So some of the cases that we bring before you are criminal history reviews. That 30% is we check the backgrounds of everybody that renews or tries to get an application with us for a first-time license. We check that criminal background. We check it against the criminal conviction guidelines per program and per statute and say, is this a crime that's directly related to this occupation? If it is, we seek to usually deny that application or revoke that license on a renewal. So 30% of the cases that we deal with are open because of criminal history type cases. Moving to the next page, you will see a listing of, and this was kind of what you used to see, is kind of a breakdown of what happened with all these different kinds of cases. We just have added more categories. You used to see orders and then penalties assessed, collected. Now we've kind of added what are these different orders that you see. Commission orders, agreed orders, default orders. Obviously a commission order is one that's gone all the way through the contested case process where it went to NOAV, or notice of alleged violation. They requested a hearing. We went to the State Office of Administrative Hearings, got a proposal for decision, and then put that before the commission. In this program, we haven't had one. Currently, we've had 16 of them go through that process in this fiscal year for TDLR as a whole. Agreed orders, we had that one that I just spoke about. But as TDLR as a whole, you can see we had 433, so much, much more. And then the default orders. So we just kind of break it all down just to let you know when we resolve a case, just so you know which type of case it was. Now you've got the penalties assessed. That's what we've assessed this, and then collected. Luckily in this program, we have a very good collections rate. Very rarely are we ever behind or low, but sometimes you'll see that, as in TDLR as a whole, we've assessed 1.2 million, but we've only collected a little over $500,000. Part of that could be because some of that is default orders, because we assess the penalty, but we may not collect on it. Some of it could be that we have an agreed order that there is a collection schedule. They've got a payment plan going through. So at the time of this, we haven't obviously collected all that penalty, but we will collect some. So that number will get a little bit closer. Then the next things are the different types of disciplinary actions or the way that we resolve the cases. The first two are kind of program specific in the sense that if there's a violation of the laws and rules that we need to seek a license revocation or some sort of disciplinary action with a sanction, that is what the license revoked and the license suspended category is. As you can see in this program, we haven't had any, but TDLR as a whole, it's 59 and 2. 59 revocations that we've sought and 2 suspensions of licenses. The next one is a license denial or revoke. Those are those criminal, that 30% that are criminal history, because all those, typically the sanction in that one is revocation or a denial of the application. In this program, we haven't done any, but as you can see, we've already done 104 of those this year. And then cease and desist is another tool that the enforcement prosecutors have. It's the ability to say that something is going wrong and we can't necessarily get that NOAV out and get that contested, get that process out quick enough, but we can issue a cease and desist order while we're ascertaining the facts and telling you to stop doing what it is that you're doing. We've already issued 19 of those as a department in whole. And then finally, informal resolution. Anytime we close a case for one of those other reasons, either we close it because there's insufficient evidence, maybe the complainant has withdrawn their complaint, or that there's been some sort of informal resolution, the parties got together and figured out something, and we end up closing it. That's what that informal resolution is. As you can see, we've already done like 2,500 of those for the department. The next set of statistics, that was all for like fiscal year 2020. And then the next grouping of them is for 2019. Essentially, it's the same kind of information, but it's just for a different year. So as you can see, we were a little bit busier in the boiler program in fiscal year 2019. We had 5 cases open and 5 closed. And again, we resolved most of those in 148 days. 60% of those resulted in disciplinary action. So a couple of those cases resulted in were closures. The other 3 did result in some form of a disciplinary action, an administrative sanction. And then again, we've got that breakdown again for you for the fiscal year 2019 of the agreed commission default orders. Again, as you can see, we assessed a little over $7,500 worth of penalties, and we collected them all. The last couple of big information is we're going to give you the top 10 violations, both at opening and the top 10 violations that resulted in disciplinary action. So when we get a complaint, we have to open it, and we usually open it with some sort of a violation that's being alleged in that complaint. So these will be the top 10 of that. That doesn't mean necessarily that by the time it gets to the prosecutor that that's the violation that we're going to allege, or even if that violation is going to come to some sort of a notice of alleged violation. But in this program, the top 10, even though there aren't 10 because these are the ones that were being cited, is operating without a certificate, operation of an unregistered boiler was a couple of them, failed to file an extension within the 30-day period, that was a couple of them, and then we had a couple of a bad inspector that was the allegation at opening. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to be at the back end when the prosecutor reviews it. There may be either another violation that they cite, or they may just determine that the information was not good enough to cite that violation. Whereas the top 10 violations, again, even though there aren't 10 in this case, but the top 10 violations that resulted in disciplinary action were failure to file the extension within 30 days, failed to have an inspection, operate it without a certificate, or the boiler was in an unsafe condition. So as you can see, it's a lot more information in the process. If there's anything additional that you guys are wanting or want to see, feel free to let us know. I mean, we're trying this out to see if you guys like this information, and we're happy to kind of make some changes on the fly, or add some stuff or remove some stuff if you guys think this is too much. So, but if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions? No? Well, congratulations once again, Mr. Metlock, and thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so that brings us to Education and Examination Division. Letty Grantham.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Letty Grantham with the Education and Examination Division, and I'm here to give you your report. I want to go over some personnel updates. Our division has grown immensely. We have 2 new managers. We have Angie Smith and Michael Strawn. Michael Strawn is here with me. Okay. And we have 2 team leads, Lorraine Schroff and Shanice Villanueva. Angie is over the accreditation and certification section. We handle school applications, curriculum, continuing education and the courses, and pre-license education. Michael is over the outreach, audits, and policy team, industry laws and rules, the administration of the exam, conducting CE audits, and public outreach through school site visits or industry conferences. So needless to say, we're very excited that we have a strong management team because they bring a lot of innovative ideas to the table to help us process our applications more efficiently. So we're excited about that. Turning over to the statistics, for the boiler program, part of our function in our Education and Examination Division, we administer the written exam. And looking at the statistics, for the last couple of years, you'll see the difference in the pass rate from 2018, 19, and of course 2020 is already looking good, and hopefully the numbers will increase, but we don't know that yet because that's just the last several months. But that's what I have for you so far today. If you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
That brings us to Regulatory Program Management Division, Mr. Keith Sanford.
Good afternoon, board members. It's Keith Sanford with Inspection Specialist with TDLR. Personnel updates. Currently, we have Jay Kim. He's our El Paso Deputy Inspector. We're going to be sending him to ASME. It's with the National Boards for ASME AI. Become a team member. The hopes is if he passes this class in a couple weeks, that he'll become an authorized inspector team member with TDLR. Currently, we have 5 team members that perform the current team leader performance. We'll go over outreach program. Rob Trout attended the National Board Trustees meeting in January of this year. We had ASME came down and gave training. We had Mr. Patrick Murray and Angela Holmes from ASME, and they came down and gave all the team members training on their current new QRR system, which is how we enter the team leader reports when we do joint reviews for ASME and National Board. For the ASME one, it's on CA Connect. They gave us a real comprehensive training on that, and that's a new program, and it's been a situation for a lot of the companies that do joint reviews for their ASME certificates, and it's coming a long ways. For the statistics, special inspections, we've had a total of 47. There's 37 of those have been ASME and joint reviews and 44 national boards. Those are kind of combined together. Some of the national boards are by themselves. That's why that number's higher, but a lot of times it's during the same inspection. We've had 2 state certificate of authorizations and 6 Texas specials. Total extensions process was 545. 0 variances. Restampings 1. Total inspection reports processed for BIRs is 36, and temporary operating permits 24. Total boilers inspected is 7,629, and that's total of all TDLR and AIA's boilers. We have a total of 53,000 boilers, 53,447 boilers currently, and that's broke down. You can see on the report what our percentage is and what AIA's percent is. We'll jump to overdue boilers for the total program is 1,413, and 430 of those are TDLRs. Is there any questions on the statistics?
Thank you, Mr. Sanford. Well, that brings us to executive office. Mr. Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, board members. This is David Gonzalez, Deputy Executive Director, TDLR. I am one of 3 Deputy Executive Directors here at the agency. Since y'all's last meeting, Ms. Carla James was our Deputy Executive Director, along with Mike Arismendez. Mr. Arismendez used to be chief of our commission. He loved us so much, he decided he needed to be employed with us. He came on board a few years ago and helped Carla James get the work done. Well, since Carla James' retirement in November, Brian decided he needed a little bit more help. He has some broad shoulders. Brian Francis, our executive director, is usually at all of these meetings, but we've got him spread kind of thin, so he's sharing the workload a little bit. Since then, he turned Carla James's 1 deputy executive position into 2. I got promoted from the Regulatory Program Management Division Director position to my deputy position, and Christina Kaiser, who is the Executive Director of Enforcement Division, she got promoted to a deputy as well. So now Brian Francis has a little bit more room to share the love and the workload, and you're going to see more of our faces at these meetings. Y'all have seen me before in the past as the Regulatory Program Management Division Director, but just going to be working in a different capacity, and it'll be on this side of the desk now. You've heard from the other divisions. We've been including personnel updates. I think it's important to make sure we include those personnel updates because we've been given more responsibilities from the legislature. We have motor fuel, metering and quality as a new responsibility, and motorcycles program come over to us, and that's allowed for a few more FTEs, full-time equivalent personnel hires. But we've also had moves within the agency that have people scattered around. I don't want you to be unawares that this is a logistical challenge for us because we have institutional knowledge moving from place to place, people in our customer service division that were answering all of our phone calls and emails, sometimes being promoted to other divisions in the agency, and that's a good thing for them and for us, but now we got to fill those gaps, and that's going to be happening for some time now until we get used to it. But it's something you need to be aware of. You already heard that Mr. Medlock was promoted. One of his, I guess, compadres, Mr. Ron Foster, was also promoted to become Enforcement Division Director, and Ms. Charlotte Melder, who I believe is in the audience, was also promoted. She took over my place as Regulatory Program Management Division Director. So lots of musical chairs going on. If you haven't seen us before, I know we don't meet that often, but if you haven't seen us before, make sure that we stop and introduce ourselves to you. I want to make sure that y'all get a chance to know us because we want to be tied into what's going on with y'all's industry and the program. Really was pleased with the turnout and input received at the summit this morning. Sunset review process is next on the agenda. This agency, along with every other agency in the state of Texas, undergoes a sunset review. At our summit this morning, we had attendees. I announced the honorees that they were there. They are sunset staff. They're appointed by the legislature. They've got 5 members from the Senate, 5 members from the House. They oversee a staff that come to every agency, and they actually get into the inner workings of our agency. They review our processes. They review our rules. This process actually started back in October. Y'all may have been contacted, y'all may not have. They do their business different ways, but they're usually asking for input from advisory boards, from the public, on how we get our work done and whether or not we're doing it right. At some point, probably in May, they're going to complete a report, and it's going to tell us how we're doing. These are usually not wonderful, overblown, hey, everything's great kind of reports. These are exception reports. We embrace these inception reports. We haven't had a sunset report in a long time because we've been growing so often. They kept on delaying our sunset review for the programs because we kept on having programs added. They finally had to draw the line. We have a sunset review for these programs. Everything received prior to September of 2019, September 2016 and before, those are under sunset review now. In 2021, we'll be going under a sunset review again for all the programs received from DSHS just recently, a couple years ago. So it was abated for a while. Now we've got some real work to do, and it is a lot of work. We've had at least 50 meetings with them. They get presentations from each one of our divisions. They take us aside, they get us in smaller groups, and they really find out the inner workings. They're very smart people. So I expect from this report, we're going to hear a lot of things that we need to improve on and make good on, and we look forward to it. Again, we've embraced the last time that we had our sunset report, and it got us to where we're at now by changing our processes and embracing the input that we receive from the public. That actually allows me to segue into strategic planning, which happens every 2 years. Doesn't wait as long as sunset reports, but this agency takes it seriously. I know Mr. Francis really enjoys the process. From our strategic planning process, we have gotten the input from the public about what we can do better, what we do wrong, but what we can do better, what we do right, and if you could be king or queen for a day, what would you change? And from that input, we've been able to come up with our strategic plans to go to the legislature and say, from the public, we're hearing that we could be doing this stuff better, and these are the kind of things that could help us. If there's legislative changes that are being proposed, obviously we can't lobby for legislative changes, but if the public has presented ideas, we convey that information to the legislature and let them know that this is what the public is telling us. It's up to them, and actually, as a result of sunset process, there could be legislative action from whatever proposals that the sunset may recommend when they have their findings and they give out the report in May. So these processes actually kind of combine. Again, it is an opportunity for us to get our faces out there. We will be traveling the state as we have done every 2 years. Go out to the Valley, we'll go out to San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, the different areas where we have licensee populations, and invite them to come in. We'll also be doing a virtual one. We've been doing it the past couple of sessions where we have a Poll Everywhere app that allows people to participate without having to come in person necessarily, as long as you can listen to the streaming live version, just like they're doing right now for these meetings. You can give us your input, and we also put these questions out on our website for everybody that goes to our website that has an interest in our program. Whatever stakeholder that you are, you will have an opportunity to give your input, and that input will be recorded on our website, and we will be taking that information and deciding what we can implement, what's a good thing for TDLR, so that we do take that process seriously. Please, if you haven't updated your listserv updates to get the email updates from us on a regular basis, this is the time to do it, especially for the boiler industry. This is the time that you have to give us that input. In March and April is when we'll be traveling the state, but that time period for getting the input will be up on our website for some time. Communication outreach and statistics. This basically tells us how good the boiler webpage is doing. We've gone through some pains and design help to make sure that we're doing the best job we can in getting the information out to y'all's web pages. Over the past 6 months, from July to January, the Boilers and Boiler Safety website had 24,443 views. 76% of those visitors accessed your site from a desktop computer, 19% from a smartphone, and 5% from a tablet. The top reasons for visiting the site, it's not a top 10, it's a top 5. We have the Texas Boiler Law, we have the Boiler Administrative Rules, we have forums, frequently asked questions, and boiler information. So we like being able to direct traffic so that we can free up our customer service staff for the more intense emails and questions that may require a little bit more finesse and a little bit more direction. If they can get all the information they need from your website, or if y'all have ideas on how we can improve these things, we're open to those ideas as well. I think that's all I have for the executive report, but I'm available here for any questions if you have them.
Any questions? Well, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So that brings us to item F, which is a recap of the Board of Boiler Rules Summit. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one. We had our summit this morning. We put out a lot of information, had a presentation on the history of the law and the rules, put out a lot of good information. Then we went over a new proposal. Had a lot of questions. We really appreciate all the feedback from everybody that was involved. I think it was a good success. Upon completion of that, we did convene the advisory board, or the task group for extensions, and the task group does have a proposal for the board later on in this meeting. That's pretty much a wrap-up of that. That'll bring us up to item G, discussions on possible action of work group task. First item is extensions. We have a proposal for the board for that. The next item is blow-down separators. This task group has not been able to meet. Mr. Quisenberry has been assigned as the head of that task group, and we're still working on some information, so that'll be coming forth probably at the next meeting. And then that brings us to item H. So Laura Pfefferly, if you could come up. This is a discussion of possible recommendations for the proposed amendments to existing rules in 65. This is for the proposal that the Extension Task Group came up with today in the meeting after the summit.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Pfefferly with the Office of General Counsel, and I'll be going over the two sets of rules we're looking at today. As Rob mentioned, we had the summit this morning to sort of get some input and interaction on the extension rule that we're proposing. The extension rule is not greatly modified from the way you've seen it in the past. The main change is that we're saying that you can be down for 15 days for a repair, and you don't need to even notify us of that, that those are automatically not going to affect your extension, your eligibility to get one. And the work group discussed the content of the summit, the objections to some of the rules, the ins and outs here, and the vote in the work group among the board members is that 3 are in support of the rules as written, and there was 1 abstention. There were 2 industry representatives at the work group meeting. 1 supports it, 1 does not. We had 2 changes to the proposed rule that we brought to the work group that you saw in the summit this morning, and I'll cover those as we go through the rules. Before we sort of walk through those quickly, we did receive comments on these rules when they were proposed twice before. We proposed them once in 2018 and once in 2019, and they went through the comment period, and then they were not recommended for adoption. So we did receive comments on both of those occasions when they were published, and so we've taken those comments into consideration in drafting this 3rd proposal, and we've also had input from the work group and industry, and we've pretty much clarified and refined them to say pretty much what they said on the first 2 occasions, but like I said, the main change is changing it from 10 to 15 days. We are going to be asking for your approval to propose them, which means they'll be published for a comment period. However, additional changes can be made to the rules you have in front of you. If we want to make any changes here, this is the best time to make them, because after the comment period, when it goes to adoption, if you choose to adopt them, you can't make lots of changes then because they won't have been through the public comment process, which is required for rules before they're adopted. So if you see anything in the rules that you want to change, this would be the opportunity to do that. If you decide to go ahead to vote to propose them. So I'll just kind of walk through and hit the highlights and explain the 2 changes from the work group meeting. Of course, we're adding the 4 definitions: continuous water treatment, the definition of operation and out of service are being added, and the wording was maybe cleaned up a little, but the content hasn't changed on those. And then standby, the definition for that has changed. And the definition of standby is important because for an extension, it's going to matter there. So this is newly worded to define it as a boiler that's been placed in operation at low fire, or the owner or operator can place it into operation within 48 hours notice. And that means however you have it in standby, if your program of continuous water treatment is preventing corrosion and deposits, then it doesn't really matter what method you use to be in standby. You can use desiccant, you can use nitrogen blanket, whatever else, as long as you can get it into operation within 48 hours. And so that's the only changes on the definitions. They're all in there because this is in the format it has to be published, and all of them are renumbered, so that's why they're in there. And so then the only other section we're amending is 6564. And 6564 right now, the current rule is mostly a procedure, what you have to do to get the extension. And so we've modified the procedure somewhat, but you'll see a lot of lining out, but it's not really gone. It's just kind of moved around and spaced out a little more. The main changes I would say that you'd be interested in are that you don't have to submit a statement anymore about whether you have the records. You just are required to have the records. And you get, you can file for your extension at least 3 business days before the certificate expires, and you'll be fine. So that gives you plenty of time to get that done. And the processing is much more speedy now, so you only need to worry about the 3 days. You can submit it the day after you get a certificate. You can submit it as early as you want. This section, like I said, it's kind of reorganized, but it's just giving you the steps to follow, what you need to give us when you apply for an extension. And let's see. And again, the underlined language is new, and the language that's lined out and in brackets is what's being removed. The requirement to submit the inspection report by the AIA is modified to just say submit in accordance with the health and safety code instead of putting other requirements into the rule. It's pretty clear that it has to be submitted within 30 days. So then, let's see, we get down to 7 is a new statement. Boilers for which the certificate has expired have to pass an internal and external inspection before they can get a new certificate. That's always been the case, but it's stated in the rule. I think everyone knows that. And then all of that is the procedure for applying for the extension. So then we get into B, which is sort of the conditions under which you can get an extension. This is not every condition listed here. It's not. It can't cover every possible way that you can or can't get an extension. But we're giving you an idea of the department's perspective on when they can be approved. And this goes back to the statute, which subjects any extension request to the approval of the executive director and the authorized inspection agency. The approval of extensions is at their discretion. This rule is sort of laying out the kind of discretion that is going to be applied, and for the most part has been applied, but we want to have it in rules so that you have some certainty. And so we'll just kind of walk through. The interval may be extended. Again, it's never a guarantee. It may be. If the continuous water treatment, which is a program, it's not keep water in it 24 hours a day and test it and that sort of thing. It's a program of continuous water treatment. Whenever you have a boiler, you need to have a program to prevent corrosion and deposits. You don't have to have water in it every minute of the day. So this program has to be maintained over and above everything. Then, if you've been in operation or in standby, as it's defined now, which is hot standby or being able to come up within 48 hours, if you're in operation or in standby, you're good for your extension. During standby, the water sampling and water treatment is required if you're at operation in low fire, hot standby. You've got water in there, so you need to be doing your sampling. It's an operation, even if it's not putting out product. You need to do your sampling. If you don't have water in it, naturally, you really don't need to do sampling. If you have desiccant or a nitrogen blanket, you don't have to do water sampling. You do have to adhere to your program of continuous water treatment, which is your program for preventing corrosion and deposits. The extension may be approved also if you're in operation, if you're in standby, if you're out of service, which means any way that you're out of service. We don't care. If you're out of service less than 15 consecutive days, you're good. You don't have to report anything to us. You don't have to do anything. If your authorized inspection agency requires you to let them know, we're not waiving any requirements that the authorized inspection agency has. We cannot step into that relationship. So anything they require of you, you would have to continue to do. We're not saying you don't. You just don't have to notify the department. And then the last part is if you're out of service for repairs exceeding 15 consecutive days, and you have good records that show that the interval, the extension can be approved for that boiler, you're good. If you're certain that the reason that you're down for repair is, it's going over 15 days, but your reason for being down for repair means that you can't get an inspection, you stayed full of water, you haven't opened it, you haven't shut it down, you're okay, you have records that you can defend your position, basically, that you're good, then you'll be good for your extension. So in C, we get into when you're down more than 15 days and you're not really sure if you're going to get an extension or not, you're down for 15 days, more than 15 consecutive days. The department's position, and again, it's at the director, executive director, and the AIA's discretion whether to approve it. If you're down for longer than 15 days, there's a presumption that public health and safety concerns require that it have the inspection, and we had ended the sentence after inspection. In the work group, it was added to the end of that sentence, it says, if it can be safely and competently performed. So there's a meaning to safely and competently performed for that inspection, and as was discussed, the boiler may be having repairs, but if it can't be inspected this way, then your extension is not jeopardized. And so this added phrase really doesn't change what we were saying, but it clarifies. If you're down and you can't be inspected for whatever reason that is, you haven't opened that everything on that boiler needs to be opened to be inspected, then it can't be safely and competently inspected, and you're still okay. However, the rule goes on to say that if you're down and you're really not sure, you really should let us know what the conditions are so that we can let you know whether you are going to be able to retain that eligibility for the extension or not. Because if you know it then, you can get the inspection done then, or you can choose to get it done before the certificate expires, but you will have that choice. You can make a business decision. If our feeling is that it could have been competently inspected when you were down, and then you don't let us know, we don't know, we get to the end of your certificate, your inspector says, you know, they don't have the records to support this. It could have been inspected. You're not going to get the extension, because if either the executive director or the authorized inspection agency does not approve that extension, you will not get the extension, and then you will be in a time crunch to try to get it before your certificate expires. So this really gives you an opportunity to send a quick email, describe what's going on, and get something in writing back that confirms that, yes, you're still good for your extension, or no, you're not going to be good for your extension, and then it's your choice. Get the extension then, get it any time before the end of the certificate, because you're going to have it, the internal, to get, well, you're not going to be getting an extension. You're going to start your clock over for 5 years or however many years you have to get extensions. It's going to just start that over. If you want to, if timing is an issue, you can always get an inspection and get your time clock back the way you had it. If you always inspect at a certain time of year, there's nothing wrong with applying for an extension, getting an inspection, and setting your clock back the way you want it. Don't have to. Your certificate of operation is not going to be jeopardized. It's not going to be yanked. It's good until the end of that certificate. So you can come back up. You can operate until that certificate ends, but you will have to have that internal inspection if the department has not approved that you're still eligible. And there's no way we can put in a rule all the situations where you would or wouldn't be eligible. That is why we are saying you should let us know the conditions so that we can give you an idea of our thoughts about whether you should or shouldn't be extended. So, so it's saying, you know, it's listing here the information that we want, and anything else that we or the inspection agency needs to know to make that determination. So that's going to be part of this, is that you give us something in writing, an email, fax, mail it in, whatever you want to do, that describes what's going on, and then you'll get a response in writing saying, giving our determination on that. And then it has a requirement to update. If you go down for repairs and all of a sudden things don't look so bad and you think, well, maybe I could still get my extension, let us know so that we can reevaluate. That's all that's saying. And if things go bad and you're like, oh, I may not get that extension, then let us know so we can reevaluate and update the determination, because that way you know whether to go ahead and get the inspection then or later or just before your certificate expires. And then the last part of this rule in E is just some rewording on the emergency extensions. One other change we made was in B2B, and it's just a reference to B2A. It had B1A there. We corrected it to B2A. So that's the only change from what we were bringing to the meeting, that and those words that were added at the work group meeting. And I do want to say that as these rules go into effect, we really are not changing a whole lot about the way things operate. We're putting it into the rule, but there's nothing mandatory here. You don't have to get a determination on whether you're going to be able to get an extension. You just won't know until the time's up, and then it might be really inconvenient to have to do it then. So I think this will help you out. It adds options for how you can operate that are not in the statute or the rules now. Right now, the statute does not allow you to have been in standby. So, we feel like the rules are not greatly changed from what was proposed the first two times, but we feel like they're more clear. They're lenient, flexible, you might say, and I feel like they're a good thing for you. So the issue today is that we need to decide whether to change any of the text that's in this rule, and then if we change it, that's fine. We can propose whatever we want to change. We cannot make a lot of changes later after the comment period at adoption. We can't make lots of changes then. So now is the time to change anything you feel like you want to change. And then this rule, because we've been refining it as we go and are still refining it, it has not gone to the governor's office for approval, and we have to send it to the governor's office for approval before we can publish. So in this case, we would need your approval to go ahead and publish and propose it, but before we could do that, we would have to send it to the governor's office, get the review and the approval, and then do that step. Both times it went to the governor's office before, it was approved without any problem, so I don't foresee that there will be a problem this time. If you approve it to be proposed today with any changes you make, we'll send it to the governor's office for that approval. Then we'll go ahead and publish it for the comment period, and if the governor's office doesn't have any changes, which we think is highly unlikely, then if they do have changes, we'd have to come back to you. If they don't have any substantive changes, if it's just formatting or grammar or something minor like that, it won't have to come back to you to be reapproved. So you wouldn't have to deal with it until actually after the comment period, because we'll get the governor's office approval. You don't need to meet for that. We'll get it published, go through the comment period, and then you'd be meeting again to look at the comments, make any changes at adoption that we can make, and then recommend to adopt or not. Of course, that decision is down the road. Your other options, of course, are not to vote to propose the rules and either return them to the work group or just stop work on them, and you have that choice. But we're hoping that you want to vote to propose, because we feel like it's a good thing for you, and so I'll send it back to Rob. If you have any questions, if you want to discuss any of this, I'll be glad to. Rob can explain. So this is the time.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, so this proposal is the same proposal that we put out in the summit this morning with two changes. The first change is a typo that was in paragraph 6564 B2B. It referenced notwithstanding B2A, or I'm sorry, B1A. That was changed to B2A. So that was just a typo. The other change that was made is in paragraph C. It read before, therefore is a presumption that public health and safety concerns require a boiler that is out of service for that length of time to have the required internal inspection. We added the words, if it can be safely and competently performed. Other than that, it's identical to what it was presented at the summit this morning. With that said, I would ask what the wishes of the board be.
Brian Malin, Boiler Property Consulting. I nominate that we go ahead and elect the rules changes that we've received forth.
Okay, so that would be a motion to send it to public comment?
Motion to send it to public comment, yes.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Shannon Nestor, CNA Insurance. I second the motion.
Thank you. Okay, discussion. Anybody have any discussions on this? None?
I think we discussed it to death.
Thank you. So, since we've discussed it to death, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of sending this to public comment, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not voting?
Not voting.
Abstention?
Yes.
Okay, so we have one not voting or abstaining, Dan?
Abstaining.
Okay, so we have one that is abstaining, Mr. Dan Lancaster. Thank you, that motion passes. That brings us to item I on the agenda. Laura, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. This next rule, again, this is Laura Pefferly with the Office of General Counsel. The rule we're talking about now was proposed and went to public comment, and this rule is trying to accomplish three things. First, it's requiring a carbon monoxide detector and interlock for boilers installed going forward, starting on June 1st, 2020, that it be installed on any new or reinstalled boiler in a boiler room. And that is applicable to new and reinstalled boilers in boiler rooms. And so that's that requirement in a nutshell. And then the rules also are addressing some public comment that was received on the last 4-year review of the rules. The Administrative Procedure Act requires us to review every set of rules every 4 years. And what we do is we publish a notice that we're reviewing the rules, and then if the rules are just determined to still be necessary, we just readopt them. The last time we did that review, we received a few public comments, and when we receive public comments, we always have to address them. So we're just going to address them in this rulemaking, but they're not really related to this issue of this rulemaking. So we have two comments, and then there are other edits and clarifications in the rules. So we'll just walk through, and I'll just kind of explain this. The first section, definitions, is just a clarification of authorized inspector and modular boiler. And the modular boiler definition, I understand, is being amended because of a code change, and the inspector definition is really just cleanup. So nothing remarkable there. The next section, again, pretty much just cleanup. It's just adding some words in there for clarity, making it a little more understandable. No substantive change to that. And in 65206, which is the next section, that is where the interlock requirement comes in. And I can read through this. Each boiler room containing one or more boilers from which carbon monoxide can be produced shall be equipped with the carbon monoxide detector and a manual reset. And the CO detector and the boilers have to be interlocked to disable the burners when the measured level of CO rises above 50 ppm. And in the preamble, we explained that that 50 ppm level comes from the OSHA exposure criteria. We didn't just pick that at random. And it's requiring the alarm, the detector to disable the burners when you reach 50 ppm. So that's automatic disabling of the burners. And it's requiring the monitor, the detector to be calibrated in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. The applicability is next for boilers that are installed after June 1st. And then, let's see, we haven't changed the next sections except to renumber them, and then the changes in G and H are just cleaning up the citations. There's nothing substantive there. So your substantive changes are basically in Section A, and this is just requiring the detector and the interlock. The modular boilers section was changed just to reflect the change in the definition. Just has to do with that, nothing else. And the fee section, again, is just cleanup changes to make it more clear. No substantive changes, just clarification. And the ventilation section appears to have had a lot of changes, but Rob assures me there is nothing substantive changing. He's just rewording and making it more clear. We've added that in the beginning A, that each boiler room containing one or more boilers from which CO can be produced. That was not in there before, so of course we want to limit the ventilation requirements to boilers like that can produce CO. And then it kind of breaks up the section and lays out the requirements that were already there, but we think it's more clear this way. The number 4 and then C, you can see lots of wording added there, but again, it isn't a substantive change, and if you have questions about that, Rob can certainly explain that better than I can, but the ventilation requirements are substantively not changing. They are what they were. We're just trying to make it more clear in here, and also for consistency with the interlock requirement, that this is more clear here. Let's see. You looked at all of this at proposal too, so I don't want to belabor it, but
I may be able to recap on that and
Yeah.
help out to make it clearer.
Yeah.
So basically what we did is we had provisions in ventilation of the ventilation requirements of the mechanical room. We had requirements for interlocking carbon monoxide detectors for sealed combustion boilers. Those requirements were actually pulled out of that requirement for those sealed combustion boilers, and then they were moved over to requirements, or they pulled it out of ventilation requirements and they moved it into requirements for the boiler room. So all we did is we took the same requirements that we already had and moved them from one location to another location and applied them to all. Now, as I understand it, that is still out for public comment right now, and we have received one public comment, correct?
Yeah.
So, Do you have the answer for that one public comment that you can share with us?
Yeah, we've only received one comment, and I checked this today, and we only received this one comment on any of this. And the comment, I could just kind of read you the summary. The commenter describes concerns with immediate and unwarned disabling of the burners of one or more boilers in low-risk environments, including remote boilers in isolated buildings and boiler rooms with segregated combustion and air ventilation systems. The commenter expressed that the consequences could be costly, result in loss of product, and possibly endanger public health and welfare in some facilities. The commenter recommends that the carbon monoxide detector function as an audible and visual alarm without disabling the burners, or as a two-stage alarm system that provides time to address the problem before the burners are disabled. And the response I'm going to read to you is draft. If you feel like it needs to be supplemented or changed, that's fine. The department agrees that some facilities could face serious consequences if the interlock operates to disable the burners unexpectedly. The department recommends that in such applications, the owner install an alarm that initiates before the trigger point of 50 ppm, at which the burners must automatically be disabled. Such early warning could provide time to address an increased concentration of CO before it reaches 50 ppm. The department will examine the feasibility of identifying types or categories of boilers or installations that may operate safely and maintain protectiveness with modification of the operation of the CO detector and interlock system. Rulemaking may be undertaken to address those applications. The existing variance procedure is available to request modification of the operation of the required CO detector and interlock system. The approval of variances is at the discretion of the executive director and the authorized inspection agency. Variances will not be approved absent the demonstration of significant need for modification and reasonableness of any modification. And I would note that the interlock requirement is only for new installations going forward, so it's not going to affect any boiler rooms that are already operating with a boiler. So it's only prospective, not affecting current operations. So that was the only comment on the CO proposal, and so far we're saying that we're not going to make a change right now, but we're offering these alternatives in the response. So we may be doing rulemaking on this to address these kinds of situations in the future. And I'll just go over quickly the other two comments. The comments we received from the rule review were that one commenter recommended that the membership of the boiler board be changed from including 3 members who represent companies that insure boilers in Texas to instead include 3 members representing authorized inspection agencies, because the majority of authorized inspection agencies are not insurance companies and therefore cannot have representatives on the board. And our response to that is simply that the statute lays out who can be on the board, so it would require a statutory change, which we can't make. The legislature would have to make. So that's basically our response there, is that we can't control that. And then the second comment referenced 65-213, which prohibits HLW boilers or potable water heaters from being incorporated into a hot water heating system as a hot water heating boiler, and asked if these boilers could be grandfathered until replacement is necessary. And the response is that that rule, the 65-213 that was referenced, right now it says that it was adopted in 2015, but it was actually first adopted in December of 2005, and it has been that way unchanged. It's just that there was a readoption and renumbering on some occasions, and this happened to be readopted, but the rule has remained the same. It's always said that, and so there's no change in how that's being applied. And so on this particular proposal, because the comment period doesn't end until March 2nd, a few days from now, ordinarily we try to have the the meeting after the comment period. Well, we're still in the comment period, but given that we have only had this one comment, we haven't had any objecting to the CO detector and interlock. What we're recommending is that you, unless you have some changes you want to make now, which if we made any changes now, they'd have to be relatively minor because we're at adoption. If you don't have any changes or you have anything minor, then our recommendation would be to move to let us address any comments that may come in before the end of the comment period. And if you if you feel like you can trust us to do that, we can do that. We expect that they might say something about cost or inconvenience, but our proposal very strongly recommended that this interlock be instituted because we've had so many deaths and exposures to CO, and so we feel like the health and safety reasons overwhelm the cost. The cost, again, as we proposed it, and still is estimated to be about $1,000 per boiler room, not per boiler, per boiler room. And so if you feel like you are comfortable with letting us address any additional comments that might come in, of course, if they're of such a nature that we feel like a major change has to be made to the rule, we can't do that, and we'd have to bring it back to the board. But to save you having to meet again on these, if you're okay with letting us address any comments that come in, as long as they aren't major changes, that, you know, if we can go ahead and do that, then we can move on to the publication and proposal and, the recommendation to the commission to adopt, which that, of course, we can't do until after the comment period closes. These rules have already been approved by the governor's office, so there's no problem there. We don't have to do that step still. They've been approved by the governor's office. They've gone through the comment period. The comment period's almost over. When we recommend to the commission to adopt, then there's going to be a preamble that addresses the comments we have so far, and if any others come in, it'll address those comments. It'll sort of reiterate what was in the proposal, and it'll have these rules as is. We have not changed a word from the proposal, so what you're looking at is exactly what was proposed. And like I said, no changes so far. It will address those two comments from the rule review. So mainly it's just recommending for adoption to keep the process moving, to let us address any comments. And again, if the comments require the board to meet again, we would just need to do that. So that that's ready for you to go forward.
I have one question, Laura. Shannon Nestor from CNA. Did you provide us with a reply to the 65213 request to grandfather hot water HLW heaters into heating systems? Did we provide a comment back to that?
Well, the comments are answered in the preamble to the adoption. Okay. That's when those comments will be answered.
So the answer is no, we don't have an answer back to that?
We do.
We do.
So we do have an answer. What she was talking about is this rule was actually adopted in 2005. Mm-hmm. They were under the understanding that it was adopted in 2015 because of the restructure of the rules that we talked about in the sum this morning with the reorganization and everything. So the commenter thought it was actually adopted in 2015, and they were wanting a grandfather for that, to take care of that when it was actually in fact in 2005. Now, I kind of want to share some little extra bit of information on this one. The reason that is because the HLW boiler is only designed to operate at 160 psi at a maximum temperature of 210 degrees. Hot water heating boilers actually go up to 250 degrees. There are also, in the ASME Code of Construction, there are multiple changes that differ between an HLW stamped boiler and an H stamped boiler, which is what's required to be on a hot water heating boiler. That criteria has everything to do with why the HLW boiler cannot be used in a hot water heating system. Okay? The answer will always be no, we cannot grandfather those types of boilers to be used in that type of a system. Okay? So that brings us to what do we want to do with this? I kind of want to back up a little bit here. Mr. Quisenberry is the gentleman that actually wrote in the comment. So I would like to give him an opportunity to speak on his comment if he wishes to do so.
Thank you, Rob.
I just want to make sure we all understand the concern and how we make sure that the clients you're talking about actually have the capability of being able to move forward without being hindered and causing problems.
The clients that I'm basically referring, I'm sorry, I'm Bill Quisenberry. There are a number of process steam boilers that are used and regulated by USDA where they record temperatures and processes and food preparation, where there can be a significant amount of product in the middle of a batch, that if there's a loss of a boiler unexpectedly, and of course, most facilities are running with a minimal maintenance force that don't monitor the boilers as they used to, that if a log is indicated that there's been a drop of temperature below a certain point, an entire batch of product has to be gone and disposed of. The other thing is healthcare facilities. We service quite a number of hospitals with surgery capabilities, and arbitrarily turning off a boiler in such an environment would be an undesirable thing, especially to disable all the boilers in a steam plant, which was the reason for my comment, is that we should have some means of alarm, especially with the technologies that are available today that could alert staff that there is a problem. There are a number of challenges because every installation is different and ventilations are different. So the time between an alarm going off and the time that it would exceed the threshold that we would all be comfortable with would vary facility to facility, which all needs to be worked out. So I realize there's more to this. I just felt like we shouldn't arbitrarily have a one-size-fits-all cure for something we all agree that's important, especially in protecting people in apartments and hotels and facilities where people stay overnight, especially where a large number of these carbon monoxide poisonings have occurred. And I'm all for this in those applications. I just would like to see provisions going forward, and I don't want to do anything to delay the adoption of this because the impact on the lives of the school children and the people that stay in these facilities, trusting that their welfare is going to be looked after, certainly trump reservations and inconveniences. I would just like to have the mechanism in place where modifications can be made in certain facilities and applications, and whether it's through the variance requests. I'd just like to see that spelled out for the different facilities.
Okay. Well, thank you for that explanation, Mr. Quisenberry. So I kind of want to go down that road that you're talking about. We actually already have provisions in the rules that allow for that, and that's actually found in paragraph 65.217, and it's called variances. So we're authorized to grant a variance to a rule if equal or greater means of safety is provided. So what I would offer up is when this comes up, if anybody's putting in a system or wants to put in a system like this, I would offer that they could request a variance, and if they come to us and say, instead of having it shut off at 50 parts per million, can we have it go into alarm at 50 parts per million and then maybe shut off at 100 parts per million? So when we go in and we look at the OSHA requirements, 50 parts per million is the cutoff point that OSHA says no more entry, but in the maritime rules, you can actually go into an area that's 100 parts per million. So I'm really comfortable with granting a variance of that effect, and there are provisions in the rules to allow that. The other thing I would say is if this rule is moved forward, it would not go back, it would not backdate. So it would not be applicable to all those locations that are currently have these boilers installed and have that. It would only move forward for those new installations and those new facilities as they come up. And with that said, I am absolutely 100% for adding some type of provision of what you're talking about into this rule. When we first started drafting these rules, I didn't even know this type of system. I didn't know that you dealt with people that would be that big of a problem with. It's just unknown. So I thank you for bringing it to our attention, and I strongly recommend that we do make a change to it. But like you said, I would prefer not to hold this up.
Can I ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, sir.
Norm Anderson. So a carbon monoxide detector would not be the only safety device on the boiler. So it would shut down all the water fuel cutoff, pressure switches, so
Yes, sir.
power outages. So what's the difference between a carbon monoxide detector shutting it down and any of the other switches, as far as the contingencies that a customer would have?
May I address Norm's concern? My concern is like many of the plants where they have multiple boilers and battery. Hospitals say that the way it's written, it would shut off all boilers in that space.
As would a power outage or
Well, power
Fuel-
outage, the
fuel
hospital has
interruption.
a generator that will come right back on. My concern was that without some provision for an alarm and, a second threshold, and I don't know how those thresholds can be established because, almost every facility is unique. And the time from 50 to 100 parts per million might be 90 seconds. So how do we keep from disrupting, a surgery or autoclave sterilizing, so that all has to be worked out. I'm all for the protection of the public, in working out these details, but it's just arbitrarily turning off every boiler in the space that could have unintended consequences.
I also kind of agree with this because, in reviewing the documentation from OSHA, it actually shows that, in maritime service, you can actually have an 8-hour shift working inside of a room with carbon monoxide levels at 100 parts per million. You just have to rotate out. So I don't think that there's going to be a life problem issue here. And if we set those parameters somewhere around, make it go into alarm at 50 parts per million and give them time to react, get maintenance time to react. And if they don't react in time and it gets up to 100 parts per million, now it shuts down. Okay, I can live with that. At 100 parts per million, someone's not going to die. So, and just for information, we are actively doing another carbon monoxide incident where 50 people went to the hospital 2 weeks ago. So this problem continues to exist.
what type of occupancy was that?
It's a nursing home, an Alzheimer's unit. 30 patients were sent to the hospital, 20 were admitted, 20 employees of the facility were sent to the hospital, treated and released.
What was the failure mode?
I'm sorry?
What was the failure mode? You can
Improper
say.
flue pipe. Other than that, I really don't want to get into the details. So, okay, so that brings us to what do we want to do? This is going to be kind of unorthodox. I would kind of like to recommend a motion for the committee. And if the committee decides that they choose to utilize that motion, then I'll let them decide to do that. The motion I would request to be made is that TDLR be allowed to respond to any other questions or any other comments we get between now and March 2nd when it closes. If there are no comments, there will be no answers, and the motion would be for the committee to move to the commission for adoption, the rules as they are. If there are comments, TDR would draft a response, send it to the members to ensure they know what a response would be, and then move forward with adoption the problem I have is we don't know what type of comment we're going to receive. I'm expecting not to receive a comment. If there's no comment, I would ask the committee to allow us to send it to the commission for adoption. If there is a comment, we would write the reply, send it to the members, and David, I'm going to have to rely on you. I don't know the proper protocol for this as far as like the walking quorum and stuff like that. Can we send them the reply and ask for permission?
I'll look to General Counsel to tell you if I'm getting it wrong, but we wouldn't be able to, if there's substantive changes, we'd have to come back, I think, and bring it before us. So if there's any comments that are addressing something and proposing changes that are substantive, we'd have to bring it back.
Then it would have to come back.
If it's non-substantive and we can address them, we're good to go. So that's what I think the motion should contemplate, is non-substantive, because the commission's going to look at this later on, and they're going to want to know that it's been vetted, that it's got the public comment period, and if I'm forgetting anything, Laura, let me know.
Yeah, that's accurate. If there are non-substantive changes, you know, if there's some minor tweaks that we know don't need to have board approval, if the board's comfortable letting us make non-substantive minor changes and addressing the comments, and you might consider approving in advance. I anticipate there might be a comment about how quickly this is going to be implemented, June 1st. If we get comments about, well, that's too soon, we could push that date back for when it's effective. If the board wants to say, well, that's okay if it's another month or two, that would be about the only substantive change I would anticipate at this point, given that we don't have any adverse or positive comments yet. But if the board wants to pre-approve that kind of a change, that would be the main thing. Otherwise, we really can't predict what substantive changes might be necessary, but based on what we have so far, I think if anything, they'd be non-substantive.
David Gonzalez, TDLR. The idea is we want to get this before the commission so we can try to move timely on protecting public life, public health, but do want to make sure that it's gone through and been vetted through the public. And so we are at the mercy of the public's comments and y'all's discretion on this matter and comfort level. Again, it is a proposal to move forward, but it is not carte blanche. We still have to get the comments and see what we've got at the end of the day by March 2nd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Bill Quisenberry, would it be a substantive change to have the rule applied to, say, Section 4 H stamped or HLW stamped boilers only at this point? I'm curious how many incidents of carbon monoxide poisonings were related to power boilers as stamped boilers.
Multiple. Unfortunately, yes, sir. That is also the realm of dry cleaners. We've had carbon monoxide exposure events in dry cleaners. We've had it at high rises, which actually utilize power boilers as well. So, what is the wishes of the committee, the board? Anybody have a motion?
I'll give it a shot. Shannon Nestor, CNA. I propose the motion to accept Chief Trout's recommendation for reply to public comment without substantial change to code or rules and move forward with acceptance. Close enough?
Bill Quisenberry, I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? So there is one other thing I would like to point out here. The rules that we're talking about, by doing what you've proposed, there is a requirement that after they come back from public comment, if they're going to be adopted, they have to be adopted within a certain amount of time. So by doing what you have just done, if it passes, we will have the opportunity to actually make that time frame. Now, I believe it's within 6 months of publish, they have to be adopted by the commission. Otherwise, we would have to come back and go through the whole process again. So, if there's no other discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to allow TDLR to answer the questions, and if there are no substantive changes, to move it forward for adoption by the commission, signify by aye.
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 Opposed? Not voting? Motion passes. That brings us to item J on our agenda, which is recommendations for the next meeting for items on the agenda. I have 3 of them. So The first one would be the extension rules that we just sent out to public comment. We'll need to address those. At our last meeting, we talked about blow-down separators. I am hoping that we can get some verbiage discussed with Mr. Quisenberry for verbiage for addressing blow-down separators as we discussed at our last meeting. And then
That would be a work group report, David Gonzalez, that would be a work group
work
report?
group has already been established. I'm hoping we can get answers from the work group and get a proposal from the work group.
Okay, so work group, meet,
Work group,
recommendations? Okay.
Yes, sir. Report from the work group and possible recommendations for adoption, or recommendations to send to public comment. And then finally, Mr. Quisenberry, I'd like to add that CO interlock with alarm and lockout to the rules we're talking about, of what we just asked to go ahead and send forward. I think it's important that we get those put in. So I will start working on drafting possible rules, and I'll probably be reaching out to work with you on that, and possibly some other stakeholders in the industry. But I'll restrict it to only me and you from the board, so we don't get into a walking quorum. Okay? Is there anything anyone else would like to add to the agenda for the next meeting?
This is David Gonzalez, TDLR. We'll probably have some type of update regarding strategic planning. We may even have some update from the sunset process, which is a report would be issued in May, and sometime after that a hearing. So depending on when the next meeting is scheduled, we may have something to update as well. So just keep that open agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Well, that brings us to item K, discussion for time and date of the next meeting. Laura, I'm going to kind of need your help with this one. Do we have any idea on when we'll get the rules back for the extensions that we sent to, we're going to send to the governor's office and then public comment? Any idea on what kind of time frame we need to start looking at for scheduling our meeting?
I do have it. I need to look at my email, though. But, yeah, if they're approved, they'll be going to publication, and I believe the April.
While Laura's walking over there, this is David Gonzalez. I'm going to take the opportunity. I didn't get to do introductions of our commissioner that attended the meeting. I don't know if y'all are aware, we have 39 programs. The commission members have divided up the programs, and they participate as they can in the different industries. If you have not had the opportunity to be introduced to Helen Collier, I'd like to make that opportunity available to you today, because it is important that the governor-appointed commissioners hear what y'all's feelings are about these things, and that they participate. So thank you.
Sure,
for being
absolutely.
here.
I do want to say, and thank you, David, that the boards that I associated with and represent are ones that I have experience with, so industry experience. So just FYI there. Thanks for everything that you do.
Back to you, Ms. Laura.
The rule would go to the commission meeting on April 7th, and then if it's adopted, it would be effective May 1st, but the CO interlock is not required until boilers installed after June 1st. You know, that's in the rule, that part doesn't apply until June 1st.
Okay. When should we plan on our next board meeting to be able to discuss and have the public comment closed out on the extension rule? Because that'll be one of the main topics we discuss when we come back the next meeting.
Okay.
I'm just curious if we need to schedule our next meeting in 3 months, 4 months? I'm not sure. Or do we just want to leave it up to staff, TDLR staff, to reach out as soon as we have a confirmed date?
David Gonzalez, TDLR, that may be best because we've got quite a few members to coordinate with to make sure we have a quorum. We also have other bill implementation team, advisory boards, and commission meetings that we have to coordinate as well. So that may be best to allow general counsel some dates in a calendar and really looking at the governor's turnaround time as well.
It'd probably be sometime in May, the way
Okay.
it is right now.
So, Angelica, I'll ask you to reach out to the board members once we get a confirmed date to start scheduling, hopefully sometime in May, ladies and gentlemen. And then that brings us to item, I already put my glasses up.
L.
L. Adjournment. We are adjourned.